Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am so delighted to have Erica Rooney with us today. Erica is a keynote speaker, chief people officer, executive coach and consultant, and host of the podcast From Now to Next. As a top culture expert, Erica invigorates and educates organizations through change, driving a positive experience for employees and guiding executives through the process of change to lead to massive success. Welcome, Erica. I'm so delighted to have you here, as I said, because change is on the minds of many, many people these days. Of course, many leaders, we're all experiencing it. So I'm grateful for your willingness to share your expertise today.
Oh, thank you. That's the only thing that stays the same. So we've got to get comfortable around it. And I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you. And from your perspective in HR, I know you've got over 10 years of experience leading organizations and through change. I'm curious, what do you see as the biggest obstacle to massive success through change?
Honestly, the biggest obstacle that I see is our necessity to be right? Employees, leaders, organizations put this desire and this need to be right before being curious. And all of that stops progress and change. And it's really interesting because the way neuroscience works and our brain works is we actually are programmed to think that we are right before we actually think through the problem versus thinking through the problem, which leads us to knowing we're right. So we dig into this like, I am right, and here we go mentality, and it completely halts all change.
I agree with you in the sense that it is that attachment to certain perceptions, to what is quote unquote right, as you said, or what needs to be, that often blocks us from being objective and being able to be curious and ask questions and explore other possibilities, which might be even better and greater than what we had in mind to begin with. And so what do we do about it as leaders?
We absolutely need to make sure that we are treating our thoughts as hypothesis, right? It is something to be tested. Maybe you're right, maybe you're not, but do not go in there like this bull in a china shop, just so, like you said, attached or sure that you are right, but go in with curiosity, go in with an open mind and state, this is what I think to be true. But now let's get curious by uncovering the questions and peeling back the layers of the onions before we make a decision. Is it?
Mm-hmm. And that makes a lot of logical sense, of course. And a lot of people, I'm sure, agree that that is a higher approach. And in real time, in stress, in relationship, it can be really hard to go there because emotions take over. I know you know that when there's a battle between logic and emotions always win because it's deeper, it's visceral, it's survival. So what do you see even more specifically as some of those underlying patterns that are creating that need to be right?
A fear of failure, a fear deep down inside that if they uncover this, they'll realize that maybe I shouldn't be the person in this seat making these decisions. Maybe, I don't deserve to be here. And when you kind of dig deep and you uncover these feelings that then lead us to attach to the necessity of being right, and you can address and create the psychological safety within the organization, and really tap into your core values, then you can kind of start to pull away from that need to be right.
And I so appreciate that you're bringing these very vulnerable mindsets that we all have in some areas of our life, right? Am I worthy of this? Am I good enough for this, right? That the concept of the imposter syndrome, what will people think if they find out that, right? And it's very real, not very conscious to a lot of people that are very head driven, but it is very real. And so tell us a little bit more about what you see as that. How does that show up, like in teams, in organizations, in leadership?
I see it show up very frequently in leadership when as I just said, like that fear exists, right? And they don't want to uncover it because they have been successful. They've been able to climb the corporate ladder, get to where they are. And now all of a sudden, they're responsible for teams, they're responsible for organizations. And it's like a big weight on our shoulders. And we feel it just crushing us into the ground. And when we don't stop and address that, like, maybe I am feeling a bit of imposter, and like, let me dig into that. Let me figure out why I feel that way. Are the people around me more tenured? Do the people around me have more experience? Why am I feeling that way? We've got to dig down deep to start to do the work. And one of the things that I do with my leadership teams that I work with is I ask them to truly uncover when they start to feel that way by noticing the sensations in their body, because our body tells us these things before our mind does. So do you feel kind of this uneasiness in your gut? Are you tensed in the shoulders? Are you flushing up your arms and your neck? Is your heart rate accelerating? What is this that you are experiencing? And then take that moment to just sit back and pause and notice those physical feelings in the body. And that is a cue that you need to breathe and dig deep, and then start to do the work to ask yourself the questions.
And how do we dig deep and do the work and ask ourselves those questions?
There are so many methods in which you can do. And I think it is very important to know thyself and do what works for you. I am a big fan of journaling. And I like to almost call this mindless journaling. So just sit down, don't have a topic in mind, just put pen to paper and start writing. And you will be amazed at the themes that you start to uncover. So I'm a big fan of journaling. One of the other things that I really believe in is reaching out to the people who are closest to you, because sometimes the things that are right in front of our face are so hard to see, but everybody else around us can actually see them. And talk to them and just say, what's going on here? Can you help me out? I'm feeling this way. And, they can say, you know what? In our conversations, you say X, Y, and Z. It leads me to believe that you don't understand your value, or that you don't know your worth, or that you don't believe you should have a seat at the table, when you should, because you've got these degrees, this experience, that unique, journey through life. So all of those things are important, but those are my two favorite ways to really start to peel back that onion and dig deep into why we may be feeling the way we feel.
Yeah, and there's such power in just pausing to witness our thoughts, to, the moment that I write them down, or I kind of pause to reflect on them, I am not my thoughts. I'm able to witness them. It's metacognition, right? There's some distance between myself and that, and I can observe it. And I think that just witnessing how we're thinking and how we're feeling in a very free, non-judgmental way is very empowering. And I think it is the beginning of change, because I can't change that which I'm not conscious of.
And it takes practice. It really does. And I've got a great story that happened to me early on in my keynote speaking career. I went to a keynote speaking boot camp and didn't know anybody that was there, but I was like, I'm coming to learn. And I walked in there and immediately realized that everybody in the room already knew each other. Everybody had already been to this conference several times, and that I was a tiny little fish in a big pond filled with whales. And I could feel those bodily sensations rising up. I felt nervous. I felt anxious. I was uncomfortable. And at the time, I didn't recognize it. I powered through that first happy hour together. And I made a beeline to the elevator as soon as I could. And I am an extrovert. So for me to be like, I got to get out of this happy hour is telling, right? And I'm standing in the elevator, rising up to my floor. And I just had this moment of, what's going on here? This is weird, Erica. You don't run away from these things. And I realized right in that moment, I said, Erica, you are experiencing imposter syndrome. You don't believe that you belong here. And I have this process that I work through with myself every day and with my clients. And it is the name it, question it, shift it model, right? And so that first step is the name it model. So in that elevator, I was able to name that I felt imposter syndrome. And then I was able to progress into the question it, right? Erica, is this true? Actually, yeah, I am the first. It is my first experience here. It is true, right? Is it helpful? Heck no. Was everybody else a first timer at one point? Absolutely. Do you deserve to be here? Absolutely. And then you can move into step 3, which is the shift it model. And I sat in that room and I did the journaling because I love to get my thoughts out on paper. And I detailed out the options that I could explore. Option number 1, don't go at all. You're feeling imposter syndrome, but we know that's not what I'm going to do. Option number 2 is go, sit, take the notes, learn as much as I can, and let's just go home. This was a lot, right? Or option 3, make the best of it. Go, put myself out there. I paid money to be here. What do I have to lose? And I had that question. I went back to it and I was like, what do you have to lose? What's the worst thing that could happen, right? So in my mind, I'm going through the worst possible thing that could happen. They could laugh at me. Okay, then what? These are all strangers. You'll just go back home. It will be fine. And I decided that I was going to go in and I was going to go big. And there were several different activities where you could raise your hand and volunteer in front of the whole group. And I was like, hand up, let's go. And I did my activity and I said it. And before I was even done, people were hooping and hollering, cheering, clapping. And it was just such immediate gratification that we have the power to control our thoughts, right? That our fate is not fixed, but that it does require bravery and it requires being uncomfortable. And if you can talk yourself through that, Erica, this is going to be hard, but you're going to do it. You're going to do it and you're going to get through it. And once I did that, everybody in the room then had a reason to talk to me. Hey, you're the person that talked about X, Y, and Z. Amazing. I love what you're doing. How did you come up with that idea? And all of a sudden, I now had this room full of friends that had I stayed quiet, had I just sat there and taken my notes, it would not have been an opportunity for me.
That is such a cool example. And I imagine people listening can kind of resonate with some version of that in their life, right? I was thinking about the first time that I went to Toastmasters and, needed to, as people do at Toastmasters, kind of share a short little response to something, and I remember standing in line for my turn and my knees shaking. And I remember thinking, what am I doing here? I know I'm not good enough. Everybody seems so calm and I'm the only one who's so nervous and all this kind of talk. And in essence, I kind of did that process, not officially journaling, but kind of going through that in my mind and reframing it. And I think that the bravery and discomfort is also when we're not used to doing this process, to just go inward, to pause and to be able to acknowledge the feelings, to acknowledge the thoughts, the sensations, right? That takes some bravery when we're not used to doing that. What do you offer for people that might have that hesitancy to follow the process you're suggesting?
It is a very real thing, right? And I love to frame it this way, in that everybody sees the world through a different lens, because we all have unique experiences and life adventures. And the way I view one opportunity, you may completely view a different way. It might terrify you and it might excite me. And so that fear, number one, know that it is absolutely normal and absolutely okay. And sometimes a good therapist is all we all need, right? But do the work, right? And let's examine and just go straight to the question part of it and just start questioning yourself and be real about it. Is this true? Am I safe? Sometimes you might need to start with, am I safe? Because maybe you're not in a psychologically safe environment. Maybe you are at an organization that does not have that set up as its culture. And it's very important to dig in and identify that. And if you can identify that you are safe, then you can start to go through, what do I need to do next? And I always tell people, I feel that fear often, and I try to stop myself that when somebody puts something forth, an opportunity comes up where I'm immediately oh no, I'm not going to do that. Why? Like, let's just take a minute. What is that reaction for? And more often than not, it is a sense of protecting, right? I'm trying to protect myself from discomfort. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to protect myself from a feeling of not belonging. That's a big one. And I examine again, is this true, Erica? Right? Even if you get up to walk up on that stage at a Toastmasters and you trip and fall onto your face, are people going to laugh, or are people going to try to help you up? You know? And knowing your audience, knowing your surroundings, if you're safe, they're going to try to lift you up. So a lot of it is, number one, establishing that safety, because sometimes it is not safe. We have to be very real. There are some organizations out there where I would not encourage someone to do that. You know, I would probably encourage them to go find a new organization. But if that wasn't an opportunity, you know, we have to be mindful about those things. But take that fear and recognize that when you feel it, you must run towards it, because the closer that you get to fear, the smaller it gets.
That is brilliant. And you know, and there are things that we can do to soothe ourselves as we approach the fear, right? We can practice coherence, right? By kind of focusing our attention in our heart, imagining our breath flowing in and out of our heart or chest area, breathing slowly, deeply, just synchronizing our body system, maybe activating a positive emotion, right? A positive feeling, appreciation, care for something or someone. And that allows the body to create some harmony as we move toward that frightening, uncertain thing. So, you know, and I appreciate that you brought up kind of the organizational lens and the psychological safety, because I think that's the connecting point between the individual as leader doing their own inner work and the individual as leader leading change, right? Creating a safe culture, a safe environment for people to enter into uncertain new behaviors, you know, changes. And so can you kind of take us through, what do you see as the biggest issue for organizations from a culture perspective to create safety?
That is a very challenging question, because all organizations are different and their culture is different. And if you don't have leadership buy-in at the top, if you don't have leaders expressing vulnerability, being transparent, right? So I'm a chief people officer. You can see behind me, I have playhouses and toy kitchens. I do this intentionally, and I intentionally do it because I am a mom before I am a chief people officer. And I'm very open about being a mom. And my kids right now are at school, but if this was after 3:30, you might notice them popping in and out. So it is my responsibility as a leader to show that it is okay to bring your whole self to work. And I use the example of being a parent because I remember when I was not in the C-suite and I was an individual contributor, feeling as if I had to lie about if I had to leave early to take a kid to the dentist office or go to a school play. And nobody should have to feel like that, because I'm not just a worker and I'm not just a mom, right? I'm a mom who works. I'm a worker who has kids. However you want to look at it, it is a piece of me. So as a leader, you must lead with those vulnerabilities. You must lead by example and create that psychological safety, because now on my team, every single person knows that, like, I got a family thing or a kid thing or a dog thing, or I got to get my hair done thing. They take care of their lives first, and work is always there. And that is like how we lead in the way that my team acts. But I do this with my entire organization, and I will have conversations with my kids next to me with my leadership team, because it is about bringing your whole self to work. So if you are a leader in an organization, let all of those guards down, right? Show that whole piece of you, because there is so much more to you than just a leader. And I say just a leader because that is just a piece of you. And there is so much more than that.
Thank you. I think it's very empowering what you're sharing. And some people might be hearing and saying, well, Erica, that sounds amazing, but that's not where I'm at. You know, it's not safe. You know, others on the leadership team are not doing that, right? It's not common. It's dangerous, right, for me to do that, because what might people think, and they might perceive certain things, and I might lose opportunities as a result of that perception. So I appreciate that every organization is different and every culture is different. What do you see as some of the most common issues when it comes to psychological safety, at a kind of from a system perspective?
I think from a system perspective, it's not recognizing your own biases that you have and not being open to the feedback. I'm very fortunate that the organization that I work with, we are a very diverse organization. So I dual reported to CEOs. I have one who identifies as a person of a color. I have one who is Hispanic. And then my executive team is 49% female. We are all very open with each other about the lens in which we operate and the lens in which we see the world. So for example, if I say something that my leader, who is a person of color, absolutely disagrees with because of his experiences, he will tell me that. He will say, that's not going to hold up for a Black man, Erica. And he doesn't do it in a manner of being defensive. He does it in a manner to open one's eyes. And you, as the receiver, have to be willing to say, thank you, because I would never have seen it through that lens. And that would never have been my experience because I've never lived the life as a Black man in America. And listen and understand them, right? But there are so many organizations that instead of receiving that feedback, push back against it because they don't want you to think that, I have these biases. It's a bad thing. We all have them. We have been taught these since birth. It is a part of who we are. We just have to recognize them and decide what to do next about it.
Yes. And for those leaders that are listening to what you're sharing and they want to create that safe environment for their teams, what's a good starting point?
I mean, if you can get a diversity, equity, and inclusion person in there to help walk you through this, that is step one. But we can't do all of that. And honestly, one of my favorite things to do is read the book We Can't Talk About That at Work with a small team, because we should talk about it at work. It is a part of who we are. And that is a book that talks about racism and sexism and politics and how to navigate the complex world we live in, which, to go full circle, at the beginning, we were talking about the importance of curiosity. All of my beliefs and everything that I believe to be true may be true for me, but they may also not be true for another. So being curious about those on your team, being a people first person, asking about their opinions, even if you don't agree with them, learning about them is the best place to start.
And research has validated that. I remember research, for example, out of Google, where they did some studies on kind of what makes a team a great high-performing team. And one of those key aspects was equal airtime, right? So it really is that curiosity with a compassionate lens, a non-judgmental lens, right? To understand other people's perception and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to express their beliefs, their perceptions, their ideas, their challenges, their doubts, because there's a home and a place for all of that. And once that is all heard, then of course, creating a safe space to kind of decide what's next with regards to what's most important for the team, the organization, and so on. So what do you think that the listeners really need to know if their organization is going through some change? Perhaps they're even experiencing some resistance to that change. What can be most helpful for them?
If you're an individual contributor, even if you're a leader, I really encourage everyone to do the work of core values and understand what your core values are. Because where I see friction and the resistance to change is in when the individual's core values is in direct friction to the company's core values and how the company is operating. And you're living in this constant state of tension and you're unhappy. And you need to do the evaluation of, is this the right place for me? And sometimes it may not be. And that is okay, because you are not a buffet. You are not here to serve everybody. There is plenty of people that make this world go round. But the true work is understanding if your core values match your organization's. If they do, and the organization is just experiencing resistance to change, sometimes it's about digging deep and looking at that long game, right? And working on your resilience muscles, finding that group within the company that is positive, that is looking forward to driving the change and working through hard times, because it is not always going to be smooth sailing, and you're not always going to have the privilege or the opportunity to go somewhere else if it's not working out for you. So finding your tribe of people within the company whose values align with yours will help you build the resilience muscle within the organization.
Mm-hmm. And, we started the conversation again with this concept of we all have our own kind of lens of how we see things. And sometimes our lens, our thoughts are not true. And, the opportunity to be curious about our own mindsets, how true are they? How helpful are they? What the options are, and so on. I believe that is really at the core of being able to lead change in a more coherent way, in a more effective way. So I'm curious again about that connection of inner world versus outer world, right? Because it's like we're kind of playing in both today. What do you see as the essence of our conversation, and where do you think we should go from here?
Oh, I love focusing on the inner work, because I believe it all starts with us, right? And your body, yourself, your mind is the one true home that you have. And you will not be able to always control what is going on around you. But there is so much that you have to control within you, your beliefs about yourself. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be an honest person? Do you want to be an empathetic person? Do you want to be authentic? You have the opportunity to make that choice. No one else does. But you can choose where you are in a lot of instances because of your mindset. You may be in an organization that does not want to drive change, but you are driven by change, right? How can you drive change internally with your mindset? How can you shift that?
Yeah. So I'm curious if you're willing to share some more questions, tactics, insights for us as to how can people make that first label their mindsets and make that shift that you spoke about. I know you gave us kind of a 3-step process, which is excellent. What else do you see that could be really helpful that maybe some of your team members have gone through, and so on?
One of my favorite exercises to do, and you can do this with your family, with your team, is to talk to 5 people who know you and ask them to pick 2 to 3 words to describe you, right? What are the first 3 words that come to mind? Have them write them down and submit them to you. And before you look at them, I want you to do the same for yourself. And I want you to see if those match up. Are you being the person that you want to be? And is it shining through? Because so often we're going to sit there and say, oh, I'm just such a collaborative person. And somebody else might think you're a micromanager, right? What's it like to be on the other side of the room as you? You don't know. You've got to ask. You've got to find out. And inviting those opportunities, look at those words, right? If you put down that you want to be an empathetic person, but that's not reflected in what you're seeing back, might be something to work on, right? How can we be more empathetic? If it does match up, you're doing great, right? But do we have some work to do, And that's one of my favorite exercises for people to do, because it really helps you align with who you want to be. And who you want to be is much more important than what you're accomplishing, right? Because those success goalposts move so often. But if you are living to those true core values and it's matching up and it's showing through an exercise like this, it is a great way to know that you are on the right track.
And I think that how we want to show up and our values are also contextual because we self-present in different ways, right? For many of us, there is a different way of being at work and at home. And so the question of, or even the exercise, how, asking people for feedback, right? The feedback I get from my friends, my spouse, my kids, right? Whoever might be very different than what I get at work. And I might not even get the truth at work if there's some,
if you don't have that psychological safety we talked about.
Exactly. So I might be operating on feedback that's not even true. And so what can you say about that? Like, how can we really get to the truth of are we aligned with how we want to show up and with our top values? How do you see that working out?
Well, I would like to say, first of all, that it is okay if you are a different person at home than you are at work, right? It is okay. Some people, the right thing for them to do is bring their whole selves to work, play kitchens and all, right? For other people, they want to keep it very separate, and that is okay. Mm-hmm. So if that is the situation, then, you pool your home resources and am I lining up as the right kind of wife, mom, friend, and sister that I want to be? Great or not great? Find out, colleague wise, am I showing up as the team member, as the leader that I want to be in my organization? Find out there, right? And if you are in an instance where you're not sure if you're going to get the true feedback, figure out a way that you can get feedback, whether that is through anonymous surveys, whether you ask them to type it up on a piece of white paper with the same size font and slide it under your door, whatever it is you need to do to get that feedback, figure out a way to do it. And it starts with you being open and vulnerable, right? Share with your team. I'm trying to be more collaborative. I'm trying to be more authentic, and I'm trying to be more empathetic in the leadership space. That's the kind of leader I want to be. I don't know if you view me as an empathetic leader, but I would like to find out. Here's how we're going to be able to do it in a safe and anonymous way if you don't feel safe enough to tell me to my face. And then you have to also work with them. I got this feedback. I told you I wanted to be empathetic and nobody sees me that way. And while that was hard to digest, here's what I'm doing, what I'm committed to doing to change that, and then actually do the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think information is power, truth is power. And it's what we do with that once we have it. Because in order to increase trust in the system, right, we need to use that feedback and actually change, right, and connect again for feedback and monitor our progress and so on, because it's sometimes worse to ask for feedback and not do anything about it.
It is. And I would love to also note this, because I am a big believer in this, and that not all feedback is good feedback. Mm-hmm. And I say that with this caveat. It is not always good feedback, but it is something to learn from. And I'll give you a great example. I did a 360 exercise one time with my executive team. And one of the pieces of feedback that I got was that I was just a little too extra. And people who know me in my life, they know that I'm loud. They know that I move fast, that I talk fast. I've got a lot of ideas. I am extra. That is me, right? And in their feedback, they said that if I toned it down, my message would be received better. And I remember at first thinking like, oh my God, I got to be quieter. I got to change my whole personality. And I was talking to my mom about this, and she was like, what are you talking about? This is what got you into this executive role. This is what has driven your career. And I was like, you know what? You're right. But it was a moment for me to learn that that is how I should work with that person if I want to best be received. I did not need to change myself or anything else that I'm doing, except for maybe if I want that one person to work better with me and have a stronger connection, to shift a little in my delivery with that one individual.
Yeah. So, it seems like the essence of our conversation today is the word "and," right? It's not, work or home. It's not, this or that, or individual versus organization. It's the "and." right? My values and organization's values, right? My perceptions and others' perceptions, right? Like all, showing up, as you said, more coherently in all the areas of our life, because we're rooted in our own truth. And that goes back to the very beginning of who are we? What is important to us? What do we believe? And if we can ground all change, individual, team, organizational change in our truth, then we can make decisions more easily. Is this the right culture for me, organization for me? What, if anything, do I need to adapt to in order to fit better with this situation? So I'm curious, kind of as we complete here, what would you say again, kind of as the biggest tip that you would give to a new leader who is struggling with their own inner transition and, now managing people, from being an individual contributor, but also being in a culture where there is a lot of change and uncertainty? What do they need to know?
They need to be curious. Be curious. Ask questions. Go at everything with an open mind and take all of that down. Because when you are a new leader, there is so much to learn and there is so much to just get your mind wrapped around. And if you can express this curiosity, it will allow others to trust you and to see that you are interested in who they are. You are interested in them as a person and what they have to say and what they have to bring to the table. So my biggest advice to all new leaders is approach with curiosity.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm curious, how can people learn more about you, your presentations, your programs, your podcasts?
Absolutely. No, thank you for asking. If you are interested, if you liked this podcast, you can listen to my podcast, From Now to Next. It's wherever you listen to this one. And you can always check me out. My website is www.fromnowtonext.org. I would love to partner with you in your organization or you individually to help you through any kind of change.
Super cool. Well, thank you again for sharing these insights, right? The inner perspective, the system perspective, because at the end of the day, it's not one or the other. It really is the integration of both where the most exciting, sustainable change happens. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.